When you live life God's way, it's better than you could imagine. In fact, that's why in Matthew chapter 5, when Jesus begins these attitudes, the Beatitudes, he begins every one of them with the word blessed, and in the word of Jesus' day, it was a word with a double emphasis. It would be like me saying, blessed, blessed. In other words, not just enough joy to get by, to endure, no, abounding joy. The Lord's way is the way of double blessing. So we begin with the first new attitude for the new year, and it is recorded in Matthew chapter 5 and verse number 3. Interesting that Jesus would start here, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He really begins his sermon with the invitation. He takes you all the way to the end. What is this attitude? This is the attitude of humility. When Jesus said poor in spirit, let me show you first of all what he didn't say. He didn't say poor in material things. Some people have the crazy notion that if you're poor, you don't have anything physically, you must be spiritual. Or if you have material blessing, that you're not spiritual. Jesus is not equating material with spiritual here. Notice it's poor in spirit. Also, I would point out, he did not say poor-spirited. Have you ever met any poor-spirited people? I mean by that, they're always living down in the dumps and negative and speaking unbelief, fuss and grumble and groan their way through life. That is not what Jesus is talking about. In fact, notice the connection of the blessing with the poverty of spirit. What does he mean by poor in spirit? He simply is saying those who recognize that they have nothing and they can do nothing without God. Do you understand that a man who's full of himself cannot be full of God's blessing? That when we come to the end of us, we come to the beginning of Him. Remember, the Lord is near the humble. I remember Zig Ziglar years ago saying that your attitude determines your altitude. Maybe you've heard that. Well, isn't it interesting that the first attitude Jesus would bring us to is not one that brings us high, it's one that brings us low. And why is that? Because the lower you go, the higher God lifts you. If you want to be saved, you must confess you're a sinner and cannot save yourself. Be poor in spirit. And if you're a believer and you want all of God's blessing, you must live humbly every day, because only this attitude brings all of God's blessing into our lives. May the Lord help us to live today with this new attitude in the new year.